What happens when a Hollywood star walks onto a daytime talk show expecting polite applause, only to collide head-on with a host who refuses to let him hide behind charm and carefully polished answers? The studio lights are warm, the smiles are rehearsed, and the couches look inviting. But beneath the surface, tension coils like a live wire waiting to snap. Before we dive deeper, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit like, and drop a comment right now because moments like this don't just unfold, they explode. Ben Affleck steps onto the set of The View with the familiar half-smile that has carried him through premieres, red carpets, and decades of public scrutiny. The audience applauds, some cheering louder than others, and Ben nods, raising a hand in acknowledgement. He looks relaxed, almost disarmingly so, dressed in a tailored jacket that suggests effort without desperation. He takes his seat, adjusting himself just slightly, a habit born of years spent under unblinking cameras. Across from him sits Sunny Hostin, posture upright, eyes sharp, a stack of notes resting neatly on her lap. She smiles too, but it's a different kind of smile, measured, controlled, professional. It's the smile of someone who knows exactly where she wants this conversation to go. The opening moments are smooth. Jokes land. Ben chuckles, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, playing the role he knows best. The self-aware movie star who can poke fun at himself. The audience laughs when he shrugs about his internet-famous resting face, and for a brief moment, it feels like another easy celebrity segment. But Sunny's eyes flick down to her notes, then back up to Ben. Her voice, calm and even, slices through the laughter. "You've spoken a lot recently about accountability," she says. "About growth, and about how the public should understand the pressure of fame. But some people feel that accountability hasn't always been there." Ben's smile tightens. It's almost imperceptible, but the camera catches it. He nods slowly. "Well, I think accountability is complicated," he replies. "When you're in the public eye, mistakes get magnified." Sunny tilts her head. "Mistakes or patterns?" A murmur ripples through the audience. Ben shifts in his seat. The easy banter is gone now, replaced by something heavier. He inhales, choosing his words carefully. "I've owned my mistakes," he says. "I've talked openly about addiction, about personal struggles. And yet," Sunny interjects gently but firmly, "there are people who feel that when those struggles intersect with how others are treated, explanations start to sound like excuses." The studio feels smaller suddenly. Ben glances toward the other hosts, searching for a lifeline, but they sit quietly, sensing the shift. He straightens his back, jaw tightening. "I don't think acknowledging context is the same as making excuses," he says. Sunny's eyes don't waver. "But do you think context should soften consequences?" The question hangs in the air, heavy, undeniable. The audience leans in. Ben exhales through his nose, a flash of irritation crossing his face before he reins it in. "I think we're all human," he says, "and we're all capable of growth." Sunny nods, but she doesn't let go. Growth requires listening. Are you listening to the people who say they were hurt? For a split second, Ben looks genuinely caught off guard. His fingers curl together, unclasping and reclasping. "I listen," he says, a touch more force in his voice. "But I also think there's a danger in reducing someone's entire life to their worst moments." The audience reacts, some clapping, others silent. Sunny leans back slightly, crossing one leg over the other. "And there's a danger," she responds, "in minimizing those worst moments when you have power." The applause is louder this time, mixed with gasps. Ben's expression hardens. The friendly actor has slipped away, replaced by a man who feels cornered. "With respect," he says, "I don't think that's what I'm doing." Sunny meets his gaze. That's not what everyone sees. The tension is unmistakable now, humming beneath every word. Ben glances down, then back up, eyes flashing. "Public perception isn't always fair," he says. "I've made amends where I can." "And where you can't?" Sunny asks softly. Silence. Ben opens his mouth, closes it again. The cameras zoom in, catching the flicker of frustration, the strain of holding composure under scrutiny. "I keep trying to be better," he finally says. The audience applauds, but it's uneven. Some clap in support. Others hesitate. Sunny nods once thoughtfully. "That's all anyone can ask," she says, though her tone suggests the conversation is far from over. The segment cuts to commercial, but the tension doesn't dissipate. As the cameras pull back, Ben rubs his hands together, staring at the floor. Sunny adjusts her notes, her expression unreadable. The clash has been polite, controlled, but unmistakably real. When the show returns, the energy has shifted. Ben's posture is more guarded now, shoulders squared, as if bracing for impact. Sunny resumes, voice steady but probing. You've talked about responsibility in interviews, she says. Yet there's often a defensiveness when criticism arises. Why is that? Ben lets out a short laugh, humorless. Because criticism can feel like condemnation, he replies. Especially when it ignores the work you've done to change. Sunny leans forward. But who decides when that work is enough? A ripple of applause moves through the audience. Ben's brow furrows. I don't think anyone else gets to set a finish line for personal growth, he says. Sunny nods slowly. True, but when your actions affect others, their voices matter too. Ben's eyes darken. I'm not dismissing anyone, he says more sharply now. I'm saying there's room for nuance. And I'm saying, Sunny counters, that nuance shouldn't erase accountability. The exchange feels less like an interview and more like a courtroom. Measured questions, careful answers, an unspoken jury watching from the seats. Ben's foot taps against the floor. You're framing this like I've refused to take responsibility, he says. Sunny raises an eyebrow. Have you always? The question lands hard. Ben pauses, lips pressed together. No, he admits. I haven't always. But I'm trying now. The admission softens the room slightly. A few audience members clap. Sunny's expression eases, just a fraction. That acknowledgement matters, she says. But so does consistency. Ben nods, the fight draining from his shoulders. Fair, he says quietly. The segment ends with polite smiles and applause, but the damage, or revelation, has already been done. As Ben leaves the stage, he waves to the audience, but his eyes are distant, thoughtful, heavy. Sunny watches him go, her face composed, aware that the conversation will not end here. Within hours, clips flood social media. Headlines clash just as sharply as the interview did. Some praise Sunny for holding her ground, calling the exchange brave and necessary. Others accuse her of ambushing Ben, of turning a daytime show into a public reckoning. Fans dissect every pause, every shift in tone, every flicker of emotion. Ben releases a brief statement later that evening, thanking The View for the conversation and reiterating his commitment to growth. It's polite, measured, but the internet is already ablaze. Sunny responds in her own way, sharing a message about the importance of dialogue and accountability, without naming names. The audience reaction becomes the real aftermath. Comment sections overflow with debate. Was Ben defensive or honest? Was Sunny relentless or responsible? The clash echoes far beyond the studio, a reminder that celebrity doesn't shield anyone from hard questions, and that sometimes the most uncomfortable moments are the ones that linger the longest. Now it's your turn. What did you see in that exchange, deflection or vulnerability? Accountability or unfair pressure? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Stage View for more explosive, cinematic stories that pull you right into the moment. The cameras come back on with the familiar View theme music, but something has changed in the room. The applause sounds automatic now, thinner, like the audience is clapping because that's what they're supposed to do, not because they feel lighthearted anymore. Ben Affleck straightens in his seat as the music fades, rolling his shoulders back as if preparing for a physical confrontation rather than a conversation. His face is composed, but the tension is etched into the tightness of his jaw, the way his lips press together before he forces another polite half-smile. Sunny Hostin glances toward him, then to the audience, then back to her notes. There's a brief pause, just long enough for the discomfort to settle into the room. Ben notices it. He's been acting long enough to recognize silence as a tool. So, Sunny begins, her voice calm but deliberate, let's talk about power. The word hangs in the air, heavy and loaded. Ben blinks once, slow. His fingers interlace, knuckles whitening slightly. When you're someone with your platform, she continues, your mistakes don't just affect you. They ripple outward. And some people feel that when those ripples hit, the response has been uneven. Ben exhales through his nose, a subtle sign of frustration. He nods, but his eyes narrow just a bit. I don't disagree that influence comes with responsibility, he says. I've never said otherwise. Sunny tilts her head. But responsibility isn't just about intention. It's about impact. A low murmur moves through the audience. Ben shifts, leaning back now, crossing one ankle over the other in a defensive posture. He probably doesn't even realize he's adopted. I understand impact, he replies. But I also think there's a tendency to flatten complex situations into sound bites. Sunny's lips curve into a polite smile, but her eyes remain sharp. Isn't that what Hollywood does all the time? She asks. Simplify stories so they're easier to consume? A few audience members laugh nervously. Ben's smile flickers there, then gone. That's storytelling, he says. This is real life. And real life, Sunny counters, doesn't stop being real just because it's uncomfortable. The applause this time is louder, more confident. Ben's foot taps once against the floor. He looks briefly toward the other hosts, as if hoping someone might jump in, change the subject, lighten the mood. But they remain quiet, eyes darting between him and Sunny, aware that interrupting now would feel like breaking a spell. Ben leans forward again, elbows on his knees, voice lower. I've spent years owning up to my flaws, he says. I've talked about addiction, about mistakes I've made in relationships, about ways I've failed people. I don't hide from that. Sunny nods. And yet, she says softly, some would argue that acknowledgement isn't the same as repair. Ben's brow furrows. What does repair look like to you? He asks. Sunny doesn't answer right away. She studies him for a moment, as if weighing how far to push. Listening, she finally says. Without defensiveness. Without redirecting the conversation to how hard it's been for you. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the audience. Ben's eyes flash. I'm not redirecting, he says, a hint of edge creeping into his tone. I'm explaining. Sunny holds his gaze. Sometimes explanations feel like shields. That lands harder than any accusation. Ben's lips part, then close again. He swallows. You think I'm hiding behind my struggles? He asks quietly. I think, Sunny replies carefully, that struggle can be both real and insufficient. The room feels charged now, like the air before a storm breaks. Ben lets out a short laugh, shaking his head. That's a tough standard, he says. Sunny doesn't flinch. So is accountability. Applause erupts, louder than before. Ben straightens, clearly bristling now. I don't think it's fair to suggest I haven't taken responsibility, he says. I've apologized. I've changed my behavior. Sunny's eyebrows lift slightly. According to whom? Ben's jaw tightens. According to the people in my life, he answers. The ones who actually know me. And what about the ones who don't have access to you anymore? Sunny asks. The ones whose only window into your actions is what they see publicly? The question slices through the room. Ben looks down at his hands, then back up, eyes darker. You're asking me to answer for perceptions I can't control, he says. I'm asking you, Sunny replies, to acknowledge that those perceptions exist for a reason. The audience reacts audibly now, some clapping, some murmuring, some sitting in tense silence. Ben shifts again, clearly uncomfortable. You know, he says, voice tightening, there's a line between accountability and punishment. And sometimes it feels like that line disappears. Sunny leans forward slightly. Who decides when it disappears? She asks. The person with power or the people affected? Ben opens his mouth, stops. The pause stretches. Cameras zoom in, capturing the flicker of conflict on his face. Anger, vulnerability, exhaustion all tangled together. I'm human, he finally says. I'm not perfect. Sunny nods. No one's asking you to be. Then what are you asking? Ben presses. Sunny's voice softens, but the words remain firm. I'm asking whether you're willing to sit with discomfort without pushing back. The audience falls quiet. Ben's shoulders sag slightly, as if the fight is draining out of him. I'm sitting here, he says. Aren't I? Sunny meets his eyes. Physically, yes. A ripple of reaction moves through the crowd. Ben exhales sharply, rubbing his hands together. This feels less like a conversation and more like a trial, he mutters. Sunny doesn't raise her voice. That's how accountability often feels to those who aren't used to being questioned. That's the moment something shifts, not just in the room, but in Ben himself. His posture changes, less defensive now, more weary. You think I'm not used to being questioned? He asks, a trace of disbelief in his tone. I think, Sunny replies, you're used to being forgiven. The audience gasps. A few people clap instinctively, others sit frozen. Ben's eyes widen slightly before narrowing again. That's not fair, he says more quietly now. Sunny nods once. Fairness looks different depending on where you're standing. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. The silence is thick, oppressive. Ben looks out toward the audience, then back at Sunny. What do you want from me? He asks, and this time there's no edge, just fatigue. Sunny's expression softens. Honesty, she says. Without qualifiers. Ben nods slowly. Okay, he says. Here's honesty. I've messed up in ways I can't undo. I've hurt people I care about. And I don't always know what the right response is once the damage is done. The room stills. Even the audience seems to hold its breath. Sunny watches him closely. And when you don't know? I try, Ben says. And sometimes I fail again. There's no applause this time, just silence. The kind that feels respectful rather than awkward. Sunny nods. That's real, she says. But it's not the end of the conversation. Ben gives a small, resigned smile. I didn't think it would be. The host next to Sunny finally clears her throat, gently steering the conversation toward safer ground. But the intensity lingers. Even as they move on to lighter topics, the audience remains subdued, eyes still flicking back to Ben and Sunny, replaying every word in their minds. When the segment ends, the applause is polite but restrained. Ben stands, thanking the hosts, but his expression is distant. Sunny smiles at him, professional, composed, but there's a seriousness behind her eyes that suggests she knows exactly what kind of moment this was. As Ben exits the stage, whispers ripple through the audience. Phones are already out, clips being replayed, comments being drafted. This wasn't just daytime television. It was something sharper, something rawer. And outside the studio, the world is already waking up to it. The hallway behind the stage is cooler, quieter, stripped of applause and polished smiles. Ben Affleck walks through it with long, deliberate strides, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. A producer murmurs something about a great segment, about engagement, about how people are going to talk about this one. Ben nods without really hearing it. His mind is still on the couch, on the weight of Sunny Hostin's words, on the way the audience reacted. Not as fans, not as critics, but as witnesses. Back on set, the show continues, but the energy hasn't fully recovered. Even as the hosts move on to the next topic, there's a residue in the air, like smoke after a fire. Sunny sits upright, composed, but her fingers rest still on her notes. She knows what just happened. She also knows it won't stay contained within studio walls. Minutes later, backstage monitors replay clips almost instantly. Social media teams are already clipping moments, choosing angles, highlighting pauses. The exchange has a gravity that algorithms recognize immediately. Tension performs well. Ben pauses near his dressing room, watching a muted replay on a screen mounted high on the wall. He sees himself lean forward, sees Sunny's calm intensity, sees the audience's reactions flicker across the frame. Without sound, it looks even harsher. Two figures locked in something that feels less like conversation and more like confrontation. He exhales and turns away. Across the building, Sunny finishes the show with practiced ease. She thanks the audience, smiles for the cameras, and waits until the red light goes dark before letting her shoulders drop. One of the other hosts leans toward her, whispering, "That was something." Sunny nods. It needed to be. She stands, smoothing her dress, already bracing herself. She's been here before. She knows the cycle: praise, backlash, think pieces dissecting her tone, her phrasing, her right to ask what she asked. Accountability, it turns out, doesn't belong to one side of the couch. By the time Ben reaches his car, his phone is vibrating nonstop. His publicist has texted twice. His manager once. He doesn't open any of it yet. He stares out the window as the city blurs past, jaw set, eyes distant. Inside the studio's control room, producers exchange glances. Someone says, "That's trending." Someone else says, "Already?" A screen flashes with numbers climbing faster than usual. Clips are spreading, captions framing the moment in stark terms. Sunny Hostin puts Ben Affleck on the spot. Ben Affleck visibly uncomfortable on the view. Awkward clash leaves audience stunned. By mid-afternoon, the internet has chosen sides. One clip goes viral first, the moment Sunny says, "You're used to being forgiven." It's clipped tight, no context before, no reflection after. Just the line. Just Ben's reaction. Comment sections ignite. He needed to hear that. That was disrespectful. Why invite him if you're going to ambush him? Finally, someone asked real questions. Another clip follows. The pause after Ben admits he's hurt people and doesn't always know how to fix it. That one draws a different response. People slow it down, analyze his face, his voice. Some hear sincerity. Others hear strategy. Ben watches it all unfold later that night from his kitchen, the glow of his phone lighting up the room. He scrolls, stops, scrolls again. A tweet praising Sunny. An article defending him. A video breaking down his body language. A headline calling it one of the most uncomfortable moments on daytime TV this year. He sets the phone down harder than he intends to. For years, he's been dissected, His marriages, his relapses, his apologies turned into headlines before the ink is dry. He's learned to survive it, to compartmentalize. But this feels different. This wasn't a tabloid photo or a leaked audio clip. This was a conversation broadcast live, where he couldn't walk away or edit his answers. And somewhere deep down, that's what unsettles him most. Across town, Sunny sits at her desk, glasses perched on her nose, scrolling through the same flood of reactions. She reads slower than Ben does, absorbing tone, subtext. Some messages thank her for saying what others wouldn't. Others accuse her of cruelty, of performative outrage. She pauses on one comment that reads, "You could see him breaking." That wasn't journalism. That was punishment. Sunny leans back, exhales. She's heard that before, too. She thinks back to the moment, the exact second Ben asked, "What do you want from me?" She remembers how tired he looked. Not angry, not arrogant, just worn down. She also remembers why she didn't back off. That evening, Ben's publicist finally reaches him. They sit on a call, voices calm but urgent. "We need to get ahead of this," she says. "People are framing it as a takedown." "I wasn't taken down," Ben replies, though his voice lacks conviction. "Perception matters," she says gently. "We should issue something. A statement. Thoughtful. Grounded." Ben rubs his face. "I don't want it to sound defensive." "Then don't," she says. "Lean into reflection." An hour later, a statement goes out. It's careful. It acknowledges the conversation, thanks the hosts, reiterates his commitment to growth and listening. No blame. No accusations. Just controlled humility. It helps, but only a little. Because by then, Sunny's words have already sparked a broader conversation. News panels debate celebrity accountability. Podcasts dissect the interview frame by frame. Some argue Ben represents a generation of stars accustomed to redemption arcs without consequences. Others argue Sunny crossed a line, turning personal struggle into public spectacle. Sunny appears on a late-night show a few days later. The host brings it up almost immediately. "Did you expect that reaction?" he asks. Sunny smiles faintly. "I expected a reaction," she says. "Anytime you ask hard questions, people respond." "Do you regret how far you pushed?" he presses. She pauses, just long enough for the audience to lean in. "No," she says. "But I do think it's important to remember there's a human being on the other side of those questions." The clip circulates too. Meanwhile, Ben keeps a low profile. He skips a premiere, cancels an interview. Friends check in. Some tell him Sunny was out of line. Others tell him the conversation was overdue. Late one night, unable to sleep, Ben replays the interview again. This time with sound, this time without looking away. He listens to Sunny's questions, to his own answers. He notices things he didn't before. How quickly he explained himself, how often he framed accountability around effort rather than impact. It's uncomfortable. It's humbling. And it sticks. Days later, an unexpected thing happens. A longer clip starts trending. Not the sharpest line, not the most awkward pause, but a quieter moment. Ben saying, "I don't always know what the right response is once the damage is done." People share it with captions like, "This felt honest." This is where the conversation should start. The narrative shifts just slightly, from clash to complexity. Sunny notices too. She watches that clip on her phone between meetings. She nods once slowly. This, she thinks, is why the question mattered. Still, not everyone is satisfied. Critics continue to argue. Fans continue to defend. The moment has taken on a life of its own, larger than either of them. Weeks later, Ben and Sunny never speak directly about it again. No follow-up sit-down. No public reconciliation. Just parallel paths moving forward under the shadow of a shared moment. But the impact lingers. For Ben, interviews change subtly. He listens longer. Explains less. When asked about accountability, he speaks more about harm than intention. For Sunny, the moment becomes a reference point. Proof to some of her courage, proof to others of her severity. She accepts both. And for the audience, it becomes one of those television moments people remember not because it was explosive, but because it felt uncomfortably real. A reminder that sometimes, the most dramatic clashes aren't about shouting or insults, but about refusing to let someone retreat into rehearsed answers. The question remains suspended in the air, unanswered and unavoidable. What does accountability actually look like when the cameras are on? And the world is still debating it. The conversation doesn't end when the camera is shut off. It never does. It seeps outward, into living rooms and group chats, into late-night arguments and morning headlines, growing larger the further it travels from that couch on The View. By the time a full week has passed, the clash between Ben Affleck and Sunny Hostin has transformed into something bigger than either of them. A cultural flashpoint, endlessly replayed, reinterpreted, and repurposed. In the studio audience, people who were there that day tell their own versions of the story. One woman posts a shaky phone video filmed from her seat, whispering, "You could feel the tension in your chest." Another writes a long Facebook post about how the room went quiet in a way she'd never experienced on a daytime show. Their accounts spread, adding texture to the clips, making the moment feel alive again. Media outlets jump in with confidence. Headlines grow bolder. Ben Affleck confronted live on air. Sunny Hostin sparks firestorm. Was this accountability or ambush? Panels of commentators argue in split screens, one side insisting the exchange was necessary, the other claiming it crossed an ethical line. No one agrees on the answer, but everyone agrees on one thing. It was unforgettable. Ben feels the aftershock everywhere. At a charity event he attends quietly, people approach him with a gentler curiosity than before. Some thank him for staying in the chair. Others avoid the topic altogether, as if unsure whether bringing it up would reopen a wound. He smiles, nods, plays his part, but internally something has shifted. He's more aware now of how every word can land, how silence can sometimes say more than defense. In an interview weeks later, a journalist asks him cautiously, "Did that moment on The View change anything for you?" Ben pauses. It's a familiar pause now, the kind that once frustrated him, now feels necessary. "It made me think," he says finally, "and thinking is uncomfortable. But maybe it's supposed to be." The quote circulates. It's softer than the clash, quieter, but it resonates. Some critics scoff. Others nod in recognition. Growth, after all, is rarely loud. Sunny, meanwhile, becomes a lightning rod. At public events, women approach her, squeezing her hand, thanking her for saying what needed to be said. On social media, strangers accuse her of cruelty, of arrogance, of using her platform to shame. She reads less now, protects her peace where she can, but she doesn't retreat. In a rare reflective moment on air weeks later, she speaks more generally, not naming Ben, not naming the show. "Accountability conversations are messy," she says. "If they're comfortable, we're probably not asking the right questions." The audience applauds. Some enthusiastically, some cautiously. The divide remains. Behind the scenes, producers quietly acknowledge what everyone already knows. That episode changed the rhythm of the show, if only briefly. Guests seem more guarded now. Hosts are more deliberate. The couch, once a symbol of comfort, carries a different weight. It's no longer just a place for promotion. It's a place where narratives can fracture. Online, the moment takes on a second life. TikTok edits layered dramatic music over Ben's silence. YouTube essays analyze Sunny's phrasing like a legal argument. Psychology channels break down microexpressions. Commentators who have never met either of them speak with absolute certainty about what was felt, what was meant, what was deserved. And then there's the audience, the real one, the millions watching from home, still arguing in comment sections late into the night. He handled it with grace. She asked the questions everyone avoids. He was cornered. He needed to be. The arguments blur together, looping endlessly, because the truth sits somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. It always does. Months later, the moment is referenced casually on another talk show. A host laughs, calling it one of those legendary awkward interviews. The audience laughs too. But it's a nervous laugh, because everyone remembers how it felt watching it live. The tightness in the chest, the sense that something unscripted was unfolding. Ben hears about that comment secondhand. He doesn't laugh. Not because he's angry, but because he knows how real it was. How exposed. How little control he felt in that chair, under those lights, facing questions he couldn't outmaneuver. Sunny hears about it too. She smiles faintly. Legendary is just another word for unforgettable, she thinks. What lingers most isn't the sharpest line or the loudest applause. It's the silence. The moment when Ben admitted he didn't always know how to make things right, and Sunny refused to soften that truth for the sake of comfort. That silence did more than any argument ever could. It forced people to sit with their own definitions of accountability, forgiveness, and power. Years from now, the clip will resurface again, as these moments always do. New audiences will discover it without context, without memory of the headlines, and they'll argue all over again. Was it fair? Was it necessary? Was it too much? And maybe that's the legacy of it. Not an answer, but a question that refuses to fade. Because what happens when a Hollywood star walks onto a talk show expecting a conversation, and instead finds a mirror? What happens when a host chooses discomfort over decorum? And what happens when millions of people are forced to watch and decide for themselves what accountability should look like? That's where the story truly ends, not on that couch, not in the studio, but with you. So now it's your turn. Did Ben Affleck face a moment of honest reckoning, or was he unfairly put on trial? Was Sunny Hostin brave, or did she cross a line? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. And if you're here for more explosive cinematic stories that pull you inside the moments everyone else just summarizes, subscribe to Stage View right now. The next story might be even more intense.